Falls to me to introduce our speaker this morning because I'm the master in charge of faith classes. And for those of you who don't know, normally there is a faith class in here. It is our Hindu faith class, and it's Sita Lakhani, who is the tutor of the faith class. So it's very good to have Deepak as joining us here for what is a regular event, actually, but something for you to join in with and share today. Sita Lakhani is, well, if anyone knows anything, not just about Hinduism, but about how to communicate it, how, as an educator, to talk about it to people your age, children, but also adults, in education everywhere. Sita knows it. She's done everything. She's written about it. She's taught it. She's taught teachers to teach it. She's also involved in quite a lot of community activity and all sorts of things like that. And it seems in a way appropriate at a time in our national life when we have a practicing Hindu who is the Prime Minister to think pretty seriously about Hinduism. And for those of you who don't consider the faith communities in our country much, I think this is a really important opportunity to do that. There is, obviously, in Slough, just 2 miles away, a large Hindu community, as in lots of other towns and cities in this part of the country and in other parts too. So thank you, Sita, very much for coming. Perhaps you would welcome her and listen carefully to what she has to say.
Through the vistas of the past, the voices of ancient prophets and sages and spiritual giants have been rolling down to us through the centuries to the present day. And their voices, in a way, are like rivers flowing down different sides of the mountain, sometimes ebbing, sometimes flowing, but ultimately uniting into one mighty, majestic flood of spiritual knowledge, which we're lucky enough to have access to today. But at the beginning of the 19th century, it was feared that the cause of religion would be lost forever. Under the sledgehammer blows of science and technology, old superstitions were crumbling away, and to those for whom religion meant only a handful of superstitions were in despair. Everything seemed to be slipping through their fingers, because science had brought with it this tremendous tidal wave of materialism, this tidal wave of skepticism for anything spiritual, and it was feared that this would wipe out all traces of religion before it. But actually what science and technology has done is made the world a much smaller place. Spirituality, which had previously sprung up from very isolated pockets of the world, in jungles and deserts and mountains and caves, could now all of a sudden be studied alongside each other. And what we discover is something incredible, that no matter what part of the world it comes from, no matter what language it's spoken in, no matter what culture it stems from, ultimately what it is showing is that humanity throughout the world has always tried to look beyond the lens of the material world. Humanity has been observing the world around it for thousands of years, and what it has discovered is that everything that we see, touch, taste and smell is subject to change. And anything that is subject to change is also subject to the ultimate change, which is destruction. So everything in the physical universe seems to be subject to change and is ultimately heading towards destruction. But what all these religions seem to agree on is that there seems to be a certain part of us which is somehow not subject to change, a part of us which is not subject to the rules of the physical world, a part of us which seems to be timeless and eternal. So we all agree that we have a physical body and it's subject to change, and it will meet with death one day. But this part of us, this soul, will live on forever and will not meet with death. What all these religions also seem to agree on is that this soul, this part of us, seems to be pure and pristine and perfect. But somehow or other, when it gets encapsulated into a body and mind, that luster or that light seems to get dimmed. because the soul then starts to identify itself more and more with the physical world around it, rather than its own pure and pristine nature. The trappings of the material world are so incredibly attractive that the soul starts to forget its own pure and pristine nature. And the whole point of our spiritual journey is to remember or to rediscover who we truly are. But it's much easier said than done, and it's very possible that you may need more than one lifetime to get there. So a concept which runs parallel to this is a concept which was shared by the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the ancient Jews, the ancient Egyptians, the Vikings, the pagans, and all the Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. And that is the concept of reincarnation. All of these civilizations believed that no child is born with a vacant mind. They seem to be born with certain inherited tendencies, perhaps acquired from a previous life. Suppose somebody is learning how to play the piano. The first time they put their fingers on their keys, they're very conscious of every finger on every key. But the more they practice, the more it becomes second nature. And that person could end up becoming really good at playing the piano. So it's very possible that in their next life, even as a child, they might start gravitating towards a piano. They might start displaying a natural talent or a natural ability for the piano. And the same goes with our spiritual progress. Suppose you've made a tremendous amount of spiritual progress in one lifetime. But then when you die, has it all gone to waste? No, you pick up from where you've left off. So you carry on your spiritual journey from one life to the next. So death is not seen as a full stop. In fact, it's seen as a comma. You pick up from where you left off. And it may take 5 lifetimes, it may take 10 lifetimes, it may take 100 lifetimes, until you come to that point of realization as to who you really are. But there's somebody very important who hasn't come into the picture yet. And that somebody is God. Who is God? And how does God fit into this picture? So for ancient man, we observed the world around us, and we were fascinated by the very powerful forces of nature around us, wind and fire and water. And what we did is we personified these forces of nature and turned them into deities, into gods. And we see that with Greek mythology and Roman mythology, Norse mythology, and also with Hindu mythology as well. But eventually those ideas faded into history and were replaced by this idea of tribal gods. So each tribe developed their own concept of God. But the problem came when these tribes came into contact with each other. There was conflict, and they tried to resolve their differences through fighting. Whichever tribe did the best fighting, their God was the one who reigned supreme. But eventually, even this concept of the tribal gods also faded into human history and was eventually replaced by this concept of monotheism, this idea that there is one ultimate God of the entire universe, who is all-loving, all-powerful, all-compassionate, who lies in the heavens and who is untouchable. But another concept also arose, and that was the concept that rather than thinking of God as a personality, we think of God as a principle which permeates the entire universe, which percolates and bubbles up through the entire universe and sparkles and shines in the eyes of every living thing. So, for example, for a Hindu, the conclusion of your spiritual journey would be when you can declare, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that universal spirit. I am that universal consciousness which is percolating through everything. I no longer identify myself as this small little person in this small little corner of the world. I see myself in everyone and everything. What a beautiful, what a majestic way to live your life when you have come to that conclusion. But as we said before, this journey is not an easy journey. It takes a long time. And it's possible that we may need some help along the way. So where do we turn to? We turn to the words of spiritual masters who have come before us. But the important thing to remember is that it's not enough to just read their words. We have to try and imbibe them and realize them for ourselves. No spiritual master ever said that we need to rely on the externals. That power of realization is already within us, and we have to try and realize it for ourselves in order for those words to come to life for us. Suppose I want to learn about rainwater, and I want to learn everything there is to know about the rain. I go to the library and I pick up the biggest, fattest book on rain, and I take it out the library and I start to read it. And I learn everything there is to know about the rain. I learn about the different kinds of rain. I learn how rain is formed. I learn about how rain falls. I learn about the pattern of the clouds when rain is about to fall. I've learned everything there is to know about the rain. Well, good for me. But if you squeeze that book as hard as you can, not a single drop of rainwater will come out of it. What that book has done is armed you with the knowledge to say, let me look out my window, let me observe the pattern of the clouds, let me predict when the rain is about to fall. Then I open my front door, step outside and actually experience the rain for myself. And it's only then that those words and theories come to life for you. We live in the age of science, and the challenge obviously thrown by the science lobby is that, well, spirituality is just an invention of humanity. It's just something like an airy, fairy, floaty, fluffy thing humanity has invented to make it feel better about itself. Look at science with all of its gadgets and gizmos and experiments and hard, solid evidence to prove everything. Science is not an invention, it's a discovery of the laws of the physical world. Well, my challenge back to them is that actually, I think spirituality is not an invention. It too is a discovery. Science is a discovery of the laws of the external world, but spirituality is a discovery of the laws of the internal world. And we love experiments in the age of science. So what experiments can we do to prove this? How do we know? So I challenge all of you, if you really want to know if there is anything to this spirituality business, pick up the words of any spiritual master from any part of the world, from any religion which appeals to you. Pick up their words. Don't just read them, but try and imbibe them, try and realize them for yourself. And if you still come to the conclusion that actually, you know what, there's nothing really to this, then absolutely fair enough. Just draw a line under it and continue with your life. But if you do find that there is something to it, what you will have done is you'll have discovered an anchor that will hold you steady through the storms of life. Storms are inevitable in all of our lives, and what you'll have done is that spirituality will hold your hand in those darkest and most difficult moments of your life. What you'll have done is discovered something that will help you to become spiritually strong. And once you become spiritually strong, it helps you to become strong in every other aspect of your life. But not only that, you're hopefully now one step closer to getting your get out of jail free card. Freedom from this life of eternal eating and drinking and laughing and crying. Freedom from this idea that I have to spend my whole life chasing after a happiness which always seems to escape us, until you come to that powerful sort of realization as to who you really are. I'd like to end with a little story which I've done with the Hindu class before, but I'd like to repeat it again. Once upon a time, there was a lioness, and she gave birth to a little lion cub. But unfortunately, the lioness passed away in the process, and this little lion cub was left to fend for itself. One day, this little lion cub came across a flock of sheep, and it started to observe the sheep. It saw that they would bleat, and they would graze and chew grass. So the little lion cub started following around this flock of sheep. Eventually, it started to copy the sheep. It learned how to bleat. It learned how to graze and chew grass. And eventually it became a part of that flock of sheep. Eventually it saw itself as a sheep. And the days passed, And then a lion came walking past, and he was shocked to see there was a lion cub in the middle of this flock of sheep. He ran up to the flock, he plucked out the lion cub and took him to the edge of a river. And the lion said to the lion cub, "Look at your reflection in the water and tell me, who do you look like? Do you look like them, or do you look like me?" And for the first time in his life, the lion cub looked at his reflection. For the first time in his life, he realized who he really was. And for the first time in his life, he roared. Thank you.
Now, there's an opportunity to engage with Sita about the things she said. She's raised a lot of really interesting points about the history and development of religion as a phenomenon. She's talked about the grand scale of religious experience. I know that she will answer questions more specifically about Hinduism if you want to ask what it is. But there are lots of things she's raised there that I would imagine need some investigation, or it's well worth asking questions about. So the floor's open. And please ask Caesar what you will.
Yes.
Talk about different spiritual beliefs and spiritualities. Are there any actual scientists that know experiments? Is there any actually hard evidence of the existence of a soul?
Yes, that's a really good question. So the fact that, is there any solid physical evidence for a person who is spiritual or who has had a spiritual experience? Well, the thing is, because, it's not part of the realm of the physical world. Spirituality, by definition, is not of the physical world. So how can you produce physical evidence for something that is essentially metaphysical? So the only proof of the pudding is in the eating when it comes to spirituality. You have to give it a go yourself. And if you come to the conclusion, like I said, that you don't think there really is anything to it, then absolutely fair enough. But when you do hit that jackpot, when you hit that moment of realization, you will know for yourself. And once you know, you don't need to go and seek external verification from anybody else. It's a very personal, very spiritual experience. And if you know you have hit the target, you will know 100%. So it's something that can only be applicable to you, and it's not something that you can provide physical evidence for. Any questions? Yes.
Even if the concept of spirituality is made up, it gives people hope and drives them to make morally correct decisions. Is that really such a bad thing?
Yeah, no, of course it's a beautiful thing. But what I'm saying is spirituality is not a placebo effect. There is something deeper. That's what I'm suggesting, is that it's not just some airy, fairy, fluffy, feel-good thing like a placebo. There is some depth to it. There is some truth to it. And the fact that humanity for thousands of years has always tried to look for a permanent solution to our human condition. When we look at the physical world, everything eventually crumbles, everything falls apart. So what is the thing that's permanent? What is the thing that is eternal? And where we find that is in the realm of spirituality, not in the realm of the physical world. Yeah, really good question. Yes?
You talk about it being impossible to find sort of physical evidence for the metaphysical. So what do you think about the scientific experiments with reincarnation?
Yes, that's a really good point. So yes, this phenomenon of reincarnation is something which was shared by so many different civilizations around the world. And interestingly enough, somebody did try and do scientific evidence for reincarnation. And if you're interested, I really do request you to have a look at his work. There's a professor called Professor Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia. And what he did, something really fascinating, is he studied the case studies of 3,000 children across the world, all different religions and civilizations. And what he found is these children, who tended to be around the age of 3 years old, they would suddenly wake up one morning and start recounting details of a very different life. They would suddenly wake up and say, "My name isn't John, it's James. And I got married in this church in Ireland, and I have 3 children." And Professor Ian Stevenson would fly out to this family, jot down everything that the child said. And we've got archives, we've got historical records of a lot of these things. So he would go and open up the archives and actually check the facts. And the facts fit for 3,000 children, which is absolutely incredible, absolutely fascinating. But again, Hindus are very sort of modest about these things. We don't go beating drums about it. We say, think about it for yourself. If you think it makes sense, then believe it. If not, then that's absolutely fine as well. I mean, some of the things they came up with were incredible. So suppose somebody had died from a gunshot. They would find that the child was actually born with a birthmark in the exact same position of the gunshot wound, which is absolutely incredible. But I'm not proving or saying it proves anything. Think about it for yourself. That's what Hinduism is all about. Think about it for yourself. Look at the facts and make up your own mind.
There's a question.
Oh, yes.
In your that religions exist, with one
Yes, no, that's a really beautiful question, for sure. So, I mean, this idea of spirituality is so incredibly vast. And, you know, as you know, for example, in Hinduism, we've got so many images of gods and goddesses. In fact, we've got 330,000 different ways that you can think of God, different forms of God within Hinduism alone. Let's forget about all the other religions. There's so many different ways of thinking about God. But the beautiful thing is spirituality is so broad, it's so vast. And the example that we use to teach children about how all of these different ways of thinking about God can sit well together. If you don't mind, I'll do a little story. Once upon a time there was a little boy, and he was being taught the same thing in his religion class, that there are lots of different ways of thinking about God. And he didn't understand this concept, so his teacher took out ice molds, which have different shapes, you know, stars and hearts and circles and all sorts of shapes. And he filled this ice mold with water and kept it in the freezer for an hour or two. He took it out, and then he showed his student, look, let me take out all the different ice molds. Are they all different shapes? And the little boy said, yes, they're circle and square and heart shape, whatever shapes they were. And he said, but they're all made of the same thing, aren't they? And he said, yes. And that is exactly what we do with these different ways of perceiving God. It's the same spirit at the end of the day, but you choose the shape that you like the look of most. You choose the heart if that suits you. You choose a circle if that suits you. And that's essentially what spirituality is all about. God will sort of fit into the mold that you want to give him. Spirituality will fit into that mold. So you can think of God as a personality, you can think of God as a principle. So both of those options are available, and you choose the path that suits you. The important thing is they are the same thing. And it's a shame that there is such tremendous conflict in the name of religion around the world. If everyone hopefully tried to understand this concept, we could all understand that religion is not something to fight over, it's something to celebrate. The fact that there are so many different approaches means that there is a wider field of selection for us to choose our spiritual path. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can I develop that a bit? Because I think within Hinduism, you were talking about this a bit earlier. I think Western people tend to think religion is about a set of beliefs, so a set of intellectual positions you take up, and they might be right or they might be wrong. But if I understand Hinduism right at all, I think it's practice, it's a set of actions almost that symbolize, that put into practice the deeper sense of beliefs that's important. Could you talk a bit about puja?
Yes.
And sort of just day-to-day Hindu practice,
Yes.
and perhaps how that relates to the deeper ideas that you've expressed.
Yeah, of course, definitely. So, I mean, like all other religions, Hinduism also consists of rituals. And those rituals, for example, consist in the puja, which is the worship ceremony. So usually, you know, a family has a particular preference for a particular form of God, whether it be Krishna or Shiva or Mother Goddess or whoever it is. And there are certain things that you tend to do during the worship ceremony. And the important thing to remember is each gesture that you do is a symbolic gesture. Like every ritual, it's essentially a cluster of symbolic gestures. For example, the things that you do in a puja are, you light a lamp, which is a symbolic gesture of moving from darkness to light or from ignorance to knowledge. You offer flowers and fruit as a way of saying, I offer my heart to God, I give my everything to God, I say thank you to God. And it consists of a number of different things. For example, you may ring a bell, and the bell is there to help you block out sound from the external and help you focus your mind on the actual prayer. So there's lots and lots of different symbolic gestures combined within the puja. And the beautiful thing about Hinduism is that we are not hard and fast. Suppose you don't have the time to do all of this elaborate ritual. It doesn't make you any less of a Hindu if you say, all I'm going to do is just repeat the name of God in the morning and then go to work. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We are not hard and fast about our rituals. You pick and choose what suits you the best. Yes?
How can reincarnation be real with populations constantly growing?
Sorry, I didn't.
How can reincarnations be real with populations constantly growing?
Yes, that's a really good question. Yeah, how do you explain the population growth? Well, one theory is obviously you have to think about these things for yourself. And I remember my dad was asked this same question. And this is the theory that we've come up with. And obviously you don't have to believe what we say. Think about it for yourself. One theory is that the reason why the population is growing is in reincarnation, we go through the process of evolution. We start off as single-celled organisms, plants, animals, until we become more and more complex, until we acquire a human form. And as more and more of the population from the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, starts sort of becoming evolved and becoming part of the human kingdom, the greater the population will grow. So in a way, it's very fascinating that perhaps this is the reason why there are so many people and they keep growing, the human population keeps growing. And if you think about it, human life is pretty comfortable compared to an animal life or a plant life, for example. We've got so many amenities and everything is so comfortable for us. People don't want to leave the human kingdom. So perhaps that's an explanation, but obviously you think about it for yourself.
Christianity and Islam find it harder for some ways to come to terms with Darwinism. But I think Hindu philosophers in the late 19th century found evolutionary theory very congruent with Hinduism. I wanted then to ask you a couple of questions, but just whether there is any. You said that Hinduism is amazingly wide in its range. Is there any particular philosophical school or approach that you personally practice or that your the group of people you belong to has been influenced by?
No, definitely. So, as I said, Hinduism is, consists of so many gods and goddesses and different ways of thinking about God with form. But the one that appeals to me is the principle-based Hinduism. The thinking of God in humanity, thinking of God as spirit percolating through everyone and everything. Because it really gives a true basis for ethics of morality. The reason why I am good to you is not because it's a tit-for-tat kind of system. The reason I'm trying to be good to you is because the same thing that's in me is also in you. And by doing something good, it's nothing to be so totally arrogant or totally proud about. All you are doing is moving one thing from one pocket to the other. So in a way, it's the most natural thing to do to look after those around you when you have this sort of principle-based approach to spirituality.
Do you think that humans can go back to being incarnated families?
So the thing is, when you are born as a human, you've got a very complex sort of character in a way. You've got likes and dislikes and certain preferences and all of that. So it's unlikely that you would go back to a less complicated life form. It's unlikely. So you're more likely to keep staying in the realm of the human kingdom until eventually you progress on your spiritual journey, and hopefully that's the end of your journey. When you come to that point of realization, there is no longer a need for you to be reborn again. You've sort of learned everything that you need to learn in the process. So yes, we do believe in evolution, and we believe that there is a sort of progression that we will go through, and hopefully we are all on the upward trajectory to get out of this endless cycle of birth and death and rebirth.
I'm just asked a final question about Hindu communities in this country. I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel that Hindus accepted and that you're making your way in the community? Is the fact that Rishi Sunak has become Prime Minister, is that significant? Or
Yeah,
can you
of
talk
course.
about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think Hindus by nature are very sort of open-minded, and we'd like to try and integrate with whichever society we become part of. We are, there's a huge Hindu diaspora around the world, and we do try and integrate well with the communities that we are part of. And you can see that clearly, for example, as you said, we've got a Hindu Prime Minister at the moment, which is a great achievement, the first Hindu Prime Minister for the UK. So yes, we try our best, and I think it's beautiful that we try and integrate spirituality into whatever we do. That's a really sort of beautiful thing about Hinduism, is that you can incorporate aspects of spirituality in everything that you do, especially if you think about everyone around you as being divine, everyone around you as spirit.
Any other questions?
Why should we try to escape the cycle of birth? Is life not a wonderful thing for enjoying it?
That's a really good question for sure. Why should we bother with this whole spirituality enterprise? Why should we just not stick around and keep coming back for lots of lovely holidays and lots of lovely cakes and just enjoy all the lovely things that life has to offer, of course. But the problem comes, life is not all sunshine and rainbows. Life is complicated, life is hard, and all of us will hit challenges in our life. All of us will hit points of suffering, points of very difficult moments. And sometimes it's those very hard knocks in life which will say, I need an escape, I need a way out of this. Because every time you chase after happiness, it never lasts forever. Suppose you buy a lovely new car, and then somebody comes along and keys it. Your happiness is gone. Suppose you go on a holiday, you have a great time, but your holiday is over and you have to come back. Every happiness that you chase after is limited, it's temporary. So sometimes you hit a point in your life where you're like, I've had enough of this chasing after a happiness which never lasts forever. And the only happiness or the bliss that lasts forever comes from the realm of spirituality. So sometimes it's one of those things, your spiritual journey can only start when you are ready. If you want to keep enjoying the world, keep enjoying the world. But what Hinduism would say is that eventually you will hit a point where you're like, I've had enough now, I need a way out. And that is when you start the spiritual journey.
Then it just remains for me to thank Sita very much for a very clear, inspiring talk this morning. Thank you for listening.
Free e-learning course in Hinduism. To register, please visit www.hindu-academy.com.
Talks on Hinduism. Sponsored by People Care. Encouraging caring for the elderly in their own homes. For more information, please visit peoplecare.com.